And so what kind of prison were you in?
I was in FCI, the Federal Correctional Institution at Loretto, Pennsylvania, which is a low security prison, but it's called a low medium, and then there's a high medium. So this was a low medium. It took me 5 days to get access to a phone. And I called Mark McDougall, the attorney that I liked so much. And I said, Mark, they put me in the actual prison with the pedophiles and the mafia dons and the drug kingpins. I said, what do I do? He says, oh my God. Well, he said, we could file a motion, but it'll be 2 years before we get a hearing and you'll be home by then. He said, buddy, I'm sorry. You're going to have to tough it out. And so that's what I did.
Wow. So you have this long career working for the government. Mm-hmm. They put you away. And what is it like for you to feel so betrayed and to get out? And what do you do when you get out?
I was frankly very angry when I got out. I didn't realize how angry I was. Like, people would mention it to me. Like, maybe you should talk to somebody. Maybe you should, think about a pharmaceutical option. And I was like, why? There's nothing wrong with me. I'm ready to fight and march and, raise my fist against the Obama administration. And so I was wrong, of course. I was so angry that it wasn't even healthy for the people around me. But I'll tell you, Joe, the hardest thing is you think you can just step back into your life again, and you'll never be able to step back into your life. So I thought, okay, well, I'm highly educated. I have a bachelor's degree in Middle Eastern Studies. I have a master's degree in legislative policy analysis. I finished my PhD classwork in international affairs. I got rejected by McDonald's, by Safeway, by Target, by Uber. We don't hire felons. I mean, I couldn't get a job anywhere.
And you're broke.
And I was broke. Bankrupt. Mm-hmm.
So you couldn't even get a job driving for Uber?
Uber turned me down.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. But you know what, though?
What did you do?
Well, I was confident that I was right and they were wrong. And my wife, unfortunately, she's now my ex-wife, but she gave me some of the best advice anybody ever gave me. She said, you have to keep telling your side of the story because eventually they're going to move on to their next victim. And if you keep talking, your side of the story is going to be the side of record. And eventually the truth is going to come out. And sure enough, 6 weeks before I was released from prison, I called her. I was allowed to call her every other day for 15 minutes. So I called her and I said, how was your day? And she said, it was great. And I said, really? Great? Why was it so great? And she said, because the Senate torture report was released today and it proved that everything you said was true. And I said, that is great. And she said, John McCain stood up on the floor of the Senate and said if it weren't for John Kiriakou, the American people would never have had any idea what the CIA was doing in their name. And so when I got home, God bless him, one of the first calls I received was from John McCain's chief of staff. And he said, Senator McCain says, welcome home, and he wants to know what he can do to be helpful. And I said, oh my God. I said, tell him I said thank you. I liked McCain very much from when I was working on Kerry's staff. Kerry was a little jealous of McCain. And McCain would go out of his way to shake my hand and say hi. Kerry said to me one time, why don't you two get a room or something? And I said, no. I said, we have this connection over torture. I said, McCain takes me seriously and I take him seriously. And so when I spoke to McCain, I said, these damn Obama people, they confiscated my pension. And I'm going to have to work until the day I die. They drove me into bankruptcy and took my pension. So he came up with this idea. It was a great idea to write an amendment. My attorney wrote this amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act of 2016. And it said that every American convicted of violating the Intelligence Identities Protection Act between October 1st and October 31st, 2012, shall hereby have his pension reinstated. So, of course, I'm the only person in the world that refers to. So he said, nobody reads these 1,500-page bills. We're going to slip it in there. And he said, I'm going to be on the conference committee. We'll get it taken care of. And then he got sick. He got a brain tumor. And he wasn't named to the conference committee. And so they pulled it back out again. And then he died. And so here I am, 10 years later. The only way that this can be made right is with a presidential pardon. And that's what I've been working on for years now.
So what did you do for money?
I was offered a job at a small think tank in Washington called the Institute for Policy Studies. And they said, we'll give you an office, but you're going to have to raise your own salary. And so it was just like constant GoFundMes. I did that for a year. I made $20,000 for the year. And I said, I can't do this. It's untenable. And so I just decided, look, no company is going to hire me, right? I can't go back into government again. And so I'm going to have to work for myself. So I had already written my first book, made number 5 on the New York Times bestsellers list. My second book, I wrote longhand from prison. I ended up winning 2 literary awards for that book. I won the Penn First Amendment Award, which along with the Penn Faulkner, the Pulitzer, and the Edgar Allan Poe is one of the big 4. And then I won the Forward Review's Memoir of the Year that year. I thought, I'm going to keep writing books. I started writing a column that ended up being syndicated through the Consortium for Independent Journalism. So it's like 200 small town papers around the country. And, a little bit here, a little bit there, consulting. And then the Greek government, I happen to be Greek American. My grandparents all came from the island of Rhodes. As soon as I was arrested, like within a day, the Greek ambassador called me and he said, what can we do to be helpful? And I said, you can give me citizenship. And man, like that, I got Greek citizenship. And so as soon as I got out of prison, the Greek government hired me to help them write a new whistleblower protection law. And then they passed it quickly. The parliament passed it into law, and then the European Union adopted it. So I went to Brussels and I testified there, and then they repackaged it. Now it's the law of the land in all of the European Union. And then people in the States began taking me more seriously. I started doing some paid speaking gigs. I got hired as an adjunct professor at a couple of different universities. And then, after a while, you can make an okay living. I'm still going to have to work until the day I die because I have literally nothing saved. It all went to the attorneys. And, hope for the best. I will say that I was a third-generation Democrat. I left the Democratic Party ages ago. John Brennan and Barack Obama's actions convinced me that I had done the right thing. And now I have found common cause with populist Republicans. You don't have to agree on every issue, right? You don't have to like everybody and everything that they believe in and everything they stand for. But I've struck up a great friendship, for example, with Tucker Carlson. Sweetest guy in the world and a great supporter of mine. And Judge Napolitano. It's a love fest every time that the two of us get together. And I realized that, this political system we have, it's antiquated. It doesn't work. You have to engage with the individual. Like, I never thought that I would be agreeing with Marjorie Taylor Greene on some of these civil liberties issues, right? Or Thomas Massey, or Bernie Sanders for that matter. But I've realized that I've got to stand up for what's right, not what the DNC happens to think what's right, or some politician that I used to, think I had respect for thinks is right. A couple of nights before I left for prison, the former director of the CIA's Counterterrorism Center, who later became the deputy director for operations, and was very close to Brennan. He was the DDO when Brennan was the director of the CIA. He tweeted at me and he said, "Don't drop the soap," with a laughing emoji. I gave myself a couple hours to cool off. And then I texted back and I said, "Jose, I'm on the right side of history and you are not." And that gave me such peace.